thought has been rather individualistic. The individual seeking salvation by doing good works, certainly,
Yes.
by engaging in good works in society, but seeking salvation for himself.
Yes.
That has been the base, of course. You read the story of Buddha. Buddha at the last moment refuses salvation.
Personal salvation.
Personal. He says, no. I rather remain and serve people or the world than merge myself by salvation into something else.
But must the two be mutually exclusive?
No, they are not exclusive. And I don't know, I'm not competent to talk about this, but the whole idea of salvation in India is based on the thought of, shall I say, on the divine element being present everywhere. That is, everything in a measure, not only a human being, but an animal or a stone or a tree, has something of the divine in it.
I realize that the pursuit of this reasoning, even in your letter, caused you to ask, rhetorically, of course, but caused you to ask the question, what is the meaning of life?
Well, listen, every sensitive person, in considering a problem, is ultimately driven to that.
Yes.
What is the meaning of my life, any life? What is the purpose of it? Well, an answer to it is frightfully difficult. But to this extent, that unless a person has well, some sense of mission is a big word,
Yes.
but something, some function, let us say, life becomes just a round of trivialities.
Of course.
Some function not in the sense that the person can be a dentist or a doctor or a surgeon, that's all right. It's a very good thing. I don't consider, of course, a function of merely, let us say, making money is not a function. It may be a way to an end, or just, it's an exciting race, if you like.
Or a preoccupation.
Or preoccupation. So in that sense, to get the most out of life, I suppose one has to have a certain sense of mission. I don't mean that you should become a missionary in a big sense in life, and a certain coordination in one's thinking and action, which is very difficult. Because you can't always do it. Even if you want to, you can't do it.
Yes, yes.
I would say, speaking about myself, that in my association for the struggle for India's freedom now provided a certain element of mission in my life, the independence of India. My acceptance intellectually and emotionally of what our leader, Mahatma Gandhi, laid down the ways, satisfied me, as I said, emotionally and intellectually, but not 100%, 90%. And my being able to act on that, not all the time, nobody can act all the time on that, but whenever one could, produced a sense of fulfillment, action according to thought.
Yes.
It's not a thing which you can learn, or anybody can learn by reading a book or by listening to a speech. It's a thing you have to grow into it.
And put into practice, into action.
Yes.
Your early preoccupation with the idea of communism, which was able to give a certain kind, according to your own words, a certain kind of faith and a certain kind of discipline to the action of individuals in a society. Don't you think that in a sense...
Well, communism came into the picture as rather, when I say communism, please remember it has nothing to do with the Communist Party.
It had nothing to do with the Soviet Union as such.
It is only an attempt at a scientific understanding of social forces. So I was attracted to this theory, originally Marxian theory, broadly because it seemed to make me understand the processes of history more. I didn't accept everything that he said, He was no dogma for me.
No, well, you don't accept dogma in anything.
No, anything. It was nothing. And some things seemed to me out of date, what he had said, even then, and more so now. But there was that approach and some kind of an explanation of this dynamic of history. That was what interested.
Yes. You went on further to suggest in this article, Mr. Nehru, that democracy and socialism are means to an end, that they're not the end itself.
Well, yes, the end is the development of the individual and the group. Of the individual, I would say, principally, in a group. I don't think we can develop a group unless the individual, ultimately, unless the individual also develops.
Well, and don't we live with the means constantly and perhaps never achieve the end?
Yes, but we go towards an end. In fact, the end always recedes.
From us?
Yes, well, because there's no end, final end. If you reach one stage of a journey, immediately there's the next stage.
Well, and actually, this is the problem with the current brand of what we understand to be communism, isn't it? As it's been politically implemented.
Yes, yes, yes. That is, there is too much suppression of the individual, alliance, if you like, with violent methods. Of course, there are violent methods quite outside communism, quite a lot of them too. There's no doubt about it.
Of course.
There is that. And ultimately, I think they have bad results. There's one thing which I think I've said in that note, talking about the Soviet Union, that by the mere processes of working as they have done, they have to have large-scale education, and very good education. That is a liberating factor again. It won't uproot the Soviet state. It will change their thinking, and as to some extent it has changed, and make them think less on those rigid lines as they used to. Because ultimately, education on right lines is the biggest liberating factor of a man.
Of course. Well, then isn't this part of the answer to the thing that you posed about, we talk of the good of society and the necessity for uplifting the individual, whereas in this particular day and age, the individual seems to be lost in the mass. We speak in terms of mass figures. People in the West refer to India and China as having teeming millions. I've never heard the expression teeming millions of Americans, and yet we do teem with millions of Americans.
And certainly in the big cities.
And most particularly, and I know because I live in New York.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that this emphasis on the mass takes away from the value of the individual. We see a mass of 2.5 billion people. Don't you think what we have to do, if we have the mental elasticity, is to see instead 2.5 billion individual worlds?
Well, yes, although it's frightfully difficult. But I've often said, when asked, well, how many problems have you got in India? My answer has been 370 million problems, which is more or less what you have said.
Exactly, individual problems.
Yes, yes.
You go on to make the point, and I think a very good point, that in India today, is, for the most part of the world, there seems to be an absence of the old spirit of buoyancy, and instead you have an atmosphere of depression. And that one of your colleagues, or close colleagues, suggested that this probably was due to the fact that there seems to be an absence of a philosophy about life.
Yes.
Well, do you find that stronger in India today than 10 years ago?
Well, 10 or 11 years ago, soon after independence, there was naturally a tremendous feeling of buoyancy as a result of having achieved something for which we had struggled for generations. The immediate result was great buoyancy, of course. Although even then we had a lot of trouble, as you know, the partition of India and all that was horrible. But when people do not achieve something rapidly again, then there's no frustration. You see, basically, in Europe, Western Europe, in America, the economic revolution preceded the political one.
Yes.
And thereby, resources were created to satisfy political demands.
But you've got the opposite here.
It is opposite here.
Yes.
We get the political one without the economic.
Which is doing it the harder way.
Yes.
Much.
Yes. Well, there's no choice about it, aren't there?
No, of course not. You have to work with what you have at hand.
I think, I firmly believe in a thing which, well, I can't prove, but it seems to me almost a scientific law, one of physics or chemistry, that what you give, you will receive. If you give hatred, you'll get hatred in return. If you give affection, you'll get affection. And so on. And say, you can never, you have to pay for things you get. Pay, not in terms of cash, of course, I will say.
No, but in terms of balance.
In terms of balances. And you can't say, it's a two-way traffic.
Well, Mr. Nehru, does this represent your concept of what we call foreign policy?
I should like it to represent it, but so many things, national interests, what are supposed to be national interests, pressures, and especially in a democratic state, you can't do things which you cannot explain and make and get the people to accept. There are limitations.
Of course.
But basically, that is the concept of having goodwill and good relations. Mind you, people seem to imagine that if you differ from a person, you must dislike him.
Yes. If you differ from a person.
If you differ, yes. And you must indeed try to push him out or knock him out. Now, that is a basic error. And what Gandhi succeeded in doing was in holding to something he considered a principle with amazing strength, not losing, it doesn't matter what happened. And yet being friendly to the man who was opposing him.
Difficult thing to do in this society of ours.
Well, it's very difficult to do it perfectly. But imperfectly, if you like, or partly, the attempt to be made, that even that is, does some good. After all, in normal working of democracy, there are various groups opposing each other.
Yes.
You don't go about hitting each other politically.
Hardly.
You deliver a speech against each other. And whatever the majority decision is, well, people accept it till it is changed. Well, why not extend